This screencast relates to a lesson from Language to Go Elementary, lesson 27. It's called Irritating Illnesses, and it focuses mainly on ed-ing adjectives as well as vocabulary relating to health, and also has a reading element to it as well. You're going to need some different things for that. You're going to need this, which is the student's book, and this, which is the one page of teacher's book materials. And this one has the grammar reference in it just here under lesson 27 to help you a little bit with the grammar. And finally, the fourth thing that you're going to need is this extra worksheet, which I've downloaded from ESL Flow. It'll provide a nice final practice activity. So back to the students page here. The first part of the lesson is vocabulary and speaking. And before you start on the book materials, I think it'd be nice to have a warmer to get the students going. The teacher's book suggests a couple of ideas, mainly related to parts of the body. So you could play Simon Says. You could tell the students to get into teams and name as many parts of the body as they can in 1 minute, and whichever team has written down the most after the 1 minute is going to be the winner. You could simply brainstorm parts of the body from the students and put them onto the whiteboard. And then start on the book material. So you've got the vocabulary in the box here, and you've got the picture. I find this picture a little bit denser and confusing, so I would recommend making a different handout with some different pictures where the students can work alone or in pairs to try to match the picture to the word. And then in the feedback, you can clarify any meaning issues. I think the students will know most of these. Possibly rash is the one that is confusing. And you're doing a cold, but it might be a good idea to contrast a cold versus the flu or flu, because that would be useful for the students to have those two words. And you can focus on the pronunciation aspect as well, which I think is quite tricky with these. Stomachache, not stomachache. So a good opportunity to work on pronunciation. Don't worry about number 2. It's just there to help with drilling, but you could just do that yourself. And then it's time for a little bit of extended practice. So first of all, you could try to elicit a mini dialogue. So you could say, when you see somebody who looks ill, what do you ask them? What's the question? And you could try to elicit what's the matter or what's wrong. And then mime one of the problems, maybe a headache, and try to elicit, I've got a headache. And then ask them what some advice should be. So you could say, you should take an aspirin, you should go and have a lie down, etc. Then focus them on the items with the bullet points here and let them look at those first and think which symptom that you talked about before, headache, backache, rash, which one matches with which symptom. So they can do that in pairs, or in an online situation, just give them a chance to read these. Then choose a strong student and try to act out the mini dialogue. What's the matter? I've got a rash. And try not to scratch it, I suppose. All right. And then put the students into pairs to do other mini dialogues. If you're in an online situation, you might want to do open pairs. So open pairs are when you're all together in the group, but you just choose 2 people to work together. So I would say, Amir, you be A, and Samara, you be B. And they do the dialogue and everybody else listens. And that's an open pair. And then I'd say, okay, so Ahmed, can you be A? And Sarah, can you be B? And again, do the same thing. Closed pairs is more for when you're in a room together in an online situation or sat next to each other. That'd be closed pairs, if you're interested in the terminology. Now it's time to move on to the skills section, which focuses on reading skills. Now remember, when you're doing a reading skills lesson, it's important to raise interest first. And to set the scene as well. So think about how you can do that. You could show the picture of the Dr. Monica's helpline, and you could say, what do you think the reading is going to be about? Why do people write to Dr. Monica? Have you ever written something like that? Do you have this in your country in magazines or online? Something along those lines. Now there are 3 texts here and then 3 responses that are matched together. So there's a lot of different ways that you could do this, but I'm going to give you the option for the online version because I think we need to cut down the amount of text for doing online. So I would choose 2 of these Dear Dr. Monica texts. I think 3 would be too much. Choose 2 of them. Ask the students to read the texts and answer these questions here. Which symptom from exercise 1 does each reader have? Which reader is worried, depressed, or annoyed? And don't do number 3. I would drop that one there. So just question 1 and question 2 about 2 of these texts. You choose which 2 you like best. Give the students a time limit to read. So set the task, tell them that they're going to be looking at number 1 and number 2, and then say that they've got, 2 minutes to read the texts and then to answer the questions. Once they've answered the questions, get them to check in pairs, or in the online situation, probably I would say, talk about your answers together. I will listen. And I'd listen in and see if they're ready for feedback. This gives them a bit more confidence in their answers if they've had a chance to say them out loud first and other people have agreed with them, or if they've had real difficulty, they might be able to say, well, I don't know. And then other people might also say, yes, I don't know either. And then that'll make them feel more confident. Bizarrely. And then do feedback from those questions. Then I think we can take a little break and say, well, these 2 problems, what advice do you think Dr. Monica is going to give? And elicit from the students what advice Dr. Monica could give to each one, trying to focus on the use of should that came up in the earlier section as well. After that, you can get them to match with the 2 corresponding answers. Again, give them a time limit for the reading to encourage them to read quickly. And I would say maybe 1 minute to read and to match it together to help them to read quickly. And they match a letter to one of the answers. Again, at the end, get them to talk together while you listen and then check the answers. Okay, and now we come to the grammar focus. It looks like a vocabulary focus, but I think it's more grammar than vocabulary, but there's a fine line between the 2 sometimes. So we've got adjectives that end in ed and adjectives that end in ing. And there's a whole set of adjectives that work in this way: worried, worrying, boring, bored, etc. And the students need to know the difference between the 2. I like the idea here in exercise 6 that the book is intending the students to think through this for themselves, but I don't think that the example about Jez is very clear. So I would suggest that you take some sentences from the texts that have been used previously from Dr. Monica and put those on the board. So the article was interesting. I don't feel right, it's really annoying, it's a bit embarrassing, I was worried, etc. So maybe 2 or 3 sentences with an ing adjective and 2 or 3 sentences with an ed adjective. Underline the adjectives and then ask the students, what's the difference between the 2? Why do we use ing in these sentences? Why do we use ed in these sentences? and see if you can lead them towards the rule. Okay, I'll leave you to work out the rule for yourselves, but I think having more examples on the board would really help the students. You may need to drill some of the words annoyed and annoying. They equally might not know the meaning of annoyed and annoying, so if it hasn't come up in a previous section, you need to be prepared to deal with that as well. Next, we need to move to some practice, and we've got what I'd call a controlled practice exercise here. There's only one correct answer, so it's quite a simple exercise, a good one to do straight after the presentation of the grammar, because it will check that the students really understand. So do the first one together as an example. We'll do the example together as an example. Maybe do another one together as another example, and then let the students work on their own to decide what the correct answers are for each one. At the end, get them to check in pairs in a classroom situation, or online, get them to talk together about their answers, and then clarify the answers. I think they're going to need to see the answers. So have this on a Word document and highlight the correct ones through a shared screen if you're online, or put it on the whiteboard if you are in a face-to-face situation. Next, we need to do some practice. I'm not sure there's much value in number 8, reading things aloud. I'd never think really generates much useful practice. There is a role play on this page. So I think it's going to be important to find something else. And that brings us to the additional piece of material. Here's an activity I found on eslflow.com, a free handout to download. And I think it's got some really interesting situations. So you could take the first one in a meeting and decide what the people are saying in the speech bubbles, basically. So you could do the first one together as a class, and then maybe put the students into breakout rooms or into small groups in order to discuss the other ones. They could write their answers, they could do it just speaking. You could decide how you would like them to do it, and then come back together to share ideas. I think this could generate some really interesting responses. They might also need, well, I think it would be really useful actually, if they had a list of adjectives to use on the board, or maybe change this handout a little bit and add the adjectives, because they may well have forgotten or not looked back, and then they'll only use boring and interesting or something like that. Okay, so here's a nice activity you can use to finish off the lesson.